So today we're talking about, we have a few technical mitzvahs we're going to skip. We have a few mitzvahs which are carry pretty important lessons for us. The first one is that there are two types of korbanos. There are two types of offerings. One is called a korban chatas. The other one is called a korban ochat, which is a sin offering. The other one is called a korban ola. An ola is what's called a burnt offering. Now, an ola, you could donate anytime you want. All you got to do is say, guy says, for example, I'm going to bring a korban ola. I'm in a good mood. I got a good grade on the test. I'm going to bring an offering. You could donate a korban ola anytime you want. You're not obligated to, and it is recommended if you've ever done something. Let's say you did not fulfill a active mitzvah. For example, you did not shake a lulav, or you did not put on tefillin, or you did not do something that you should have done. Then it is recommended that you donate a korban ola, but there's no obligation. But once you say, I will donate an ola, then you are obligated. Then you've made a pledge.
Where should you donate it to?
To the Beis Hamikdash, and it's brought as you bring it as an offering, as a sacrifice in the Beis Hamikdash. That means you pledge that you will bring a korban ola. Okay, you pledge an ola. Now, the difference is that a chatas, a sin offering, you're obligated to bring. That means if you flip a light switch on Shabbos, unintentionally, you are obligated to bring a sin offering. Whereas an ola, you're not. Now, one of the interesting laws, the law over here is, the mitzvah over here is, that you do the korban chatas. It's a general rule. The general rule is that you bring the korban chatas, you offer the korban chatas, the way the Torah has said to bring. The Torah says that you bring a chatas offering, and you have to do it, fulfill all the laws, how you slaughter it, where you offer it, and so on and so forth. Now, the commentaries point out something very interesting. When we daven Shemona Esrei, how do you daven? Standing up, feet together. Do you know how your feet are together?
The angels.
They resemble the angels. The angels are described as having one foot, whatever that means. And anything you picture an angel to be, it isn't. You're talking about a spiritual being. But whatever it is, it's described in the Nach esoterically as having v'ragleihem regel yeshara. Their foot is a straight foot. That's what it says about the angels. Now, so when we daven Shemona Esrei, we want to show that we are angelic and that we are standing in front of the King with awe, and we stand with our feet together. Okay? Now, when you daven Shemona Esrei, you daven silently. Anybody know why you daven silently?
Because there was a lady in the Beis Hamikdash who was praying.
Good, Chana, excellent. Chana, we learned the laws of prayer from Chana, who was davening silently. That's where we learned the source. Why do you daven silently, though? Why do you daven silently? You're right, that's the source for it.
Because it's in a Muslim world, is it your own private conversation with God?
Very good, very good. One of the reasons is because, I don't know what you're saying, and you may be confessing some of your sins during Shemona Esrei, and we don't want the next guy to hear what you've been doing wrong.
Also, it shows it shows the power of God, that you don't need to be talking.
Yes,
loudly.
Allah, correct. And then correct, not only that, it says somebody who davens loudly means that he is a man of little faith, because you think, God won't hear you unless you yell. So we daven silently, but it has to be loud enough that your ears hear what you're saying, because that forces you to verbalize the words. Why don't we just daven in thoughts? Because we daven in thoughts, it won't have an effect on us. Our thoughts will wander. There's got to be an activity associated with davening in order that it should have the correct effect on you. And the activity is that you say the words, but it should be loud enough that you can hear them. That forces you to verbalize the words. On the other hand, it shouldn't be loud enough that the next guy is disturbed by it, number one. You don't daven out loud, because he also wants to daven and concentrate. So before anything, there's the man-to-man, just a man-to-man consideration. Well, great, you're davening, but I'd like to daven also, number one. Number two is what Alex said, because you're having a private conversation with God. You shouldn't hear my sins. I may be confessing my sins. There's an idea, by the way, you don't even talk about your sins to other people. Not because of Lashon, not because of Lashon. What? Okay. See, al chetz is because everybody's doing the same al chet together. Everybody's saying the same al chet together. So there's nothing. What do you call it? But in your own private al chet, you do silently, because even in the al chet, you can mention your own sins. You can mention your own sins. Please, Hashem, forgive thee for being an Arsenal supporter. Nobody else. That is a cardinal sin. Nobody else should hear that, and because it's embarrassing to you. Number three is exactly what Daniel said, that it shows, that it demonstrates a lack of faith. Well, you think God only hears you if you talk out loud? There's an interesting story, by the way. the Karliner Hasidim, I don't know if you've ever been davening with the Karliner Hasidim here in Eretz Yisrael. The Karliner Hasidim have a custom, I don't know where it comes from. They daven loud, they yell the davening. The whole shul, everybody's yelling the davening together. So the Karliner, there was a Karliner Chassid back in Europe, for wherever their tradition began, however, I don't know how the tradition began, but the Karliner Hasidim have this tradition, they daven very loud, they yell the davening. Now, in Europe, there was a very wise man named the Short Cover Rebbe. Have you ever heard of Rabbi Meir Shapiro of Lublin, the Daf Yomi? The Daf Yomi, Rabbi Meir Shapiro. So the Short Cover Rebbe was Rabbi Meir Shapiro of Lublin, who is the innovator of the Daf Yomi. The Short Cover Rebbe was his Rebbe. So a chassid, he was a very, very sharp man. The Short Cover Rebbe was a very sharp man. And when a chassid, a Karliner chassid was once traveling from the town of Karlin, and he came to the town of Chortkov. So he said to the Rebbe, look, I'm going to be here for Shabbos, and I'm a Karliner chassid. Do you mind if I daven in your shul? Do you mind if I yell the davening? So the Chortkov Rebbe said to him, you may not yell in our shul. Yelling is not davening, and if you insist on yelling, then you are not welcome to our shul for Shabbos. So he said, okay, what can he do? He comes to shul, 2 days pass, he comes to shul Friday night, and he's on his best behavior, and he's trying to daven, he's davening quietly, okay, makes it through the Friday night davening. Shabbos day, he gets to davening again, he's on his best behavior, he's restraining himself, and all of a sudden he gets the Nishmas Kol Chai, may the soul of every living being, he goes, Nishmas Kol Chai Tevarech Hashem, and he starts looking around, everybody's looking at this guy yelling, right, he's very embarrassed, and he gets back, so then, after davening, he walks over to the Rebbe, says, Rebbe, please forgive me for that outburst during davening. And the Short Cover Rebbe looks at him and says, that's fine, no problem at all. You know, in Tehillim, David HaMelech, when he describes prayer, he uses 10 expressions to describe prayer, and one of those expressions is tza'aka, which is yelling, crying out. That's a very legitimate form of prayer. Alex says, Rebbe, I don't understand. I asked you if I could yell in your shul. You said to me, no, because that's not prayer. Now you're telling me that it's perfectly okay. What's going on here? So Short Cover Rebbe looks at it, he says, my friend, when a Jew comes to me on Wednesday and says to me, I plan on yelling in davening, that is not davening, that is yelling. But when a Jew is davening and his soul overflows the confines of his body and it spontaneously bursts out in a cry, that's davening. He says, now, having said that, we have to be careful to not spontaneously bother the people next to us in shul, because we still have to be considerate of them. And you can't turn to the guy and say, sorry for bothering him. I had a spontaneous just now. You know, don't be so spontaneous. The bottom line is, though, tefillah is, it's got to come from the soul, but don't bother the person next to you. So we don't daven out loud, because that shows that we don't believe that God can hear us. If you're davening privately, so you could daven at a regular tone of voice, that's not considered out loud, because you might need to help you to concentrate a little bit. But generally, it should be done in a soft, in a whisper, and it also because Chana whispered in the Beis HaMikdash. Now, that is idea number one. So interestingly enough, now listen to how sensitive the Torah is. The Torah says that their different offerings are brought in different areas of the Beis HaMikdash. And the Torah says that a chatas offering and an ola offering are brought in the same area of the Beis HaMikdash. They're brought in the same side of the Beis HaMikdash, the north side. Why is it that they're both brought in the same area? And the answer is, anybody have an idea? Why are they both brought? The sin offering and the burnt offering are offered in the same vicinity of the Beis HaMikdash. Anybody know why that is? The answer is because of sensitivity to the sinners. If I see you walking in there with your sheep, oh, Daniel, what happened? You had another, if the chatas is on the north side and the ola is on the south side, so every time I see Daniel over there on the north side of the Beis HaMikdash, what happened, Daniel? Got the old light switch on Shabbos again, huh? You got to be a little more conscientious. This way, I don't know what you're bringing. Maybe you're bringing an ola. Maybe you aced the test and you decided to bring an ola. Maybe you overslept and didn't put on tefillin that day. It wasn't so horrible. It wasn't so horrific. But if I see you over there clearly with the north side, and the north side is like the sinner section, you know, okay, that means you're making an announcement. I know you're a sinner. So in order to help maintain the dignity of the sinner, the Torah says, you know what, we'll put them both together over there. That way we can help you a little bit to maintain some dignity, and nobody should know that you're a flagrant sinner.
Some people want to, because the two carbons are different. the oiler gets burned completely and the husband is only.
Right, but at least it helps to disguise it, right? At least it helps to disguise it, at least a little bit. You know, something. Look, a person who's interested in seeing other people's flaws, you'll always figure it out. You know, if you're such a busybody. But this way, I see you walking towards the north.
You don't know what one.
I don't know exactly what you're going to do. If I want to follow you and find out exactly what you did wrong, then that for sure I could do. But as a rule, I see you're walking over towards the north. So chances are it's what do you call it? You know, I don't know what it is. Maybe it was something else. Okay. All right. Now I'm skipping on to mitzvah number 141. This is also a very interesting concept over here, where there's something called a korban shlomim. A shlomim is a peace offering. It's also a korban that you donate to the Beis Hamikdash. Now, among the shlomim categories, there's a korban called a korban toda. Anybody know what a korban toda is? It is a thanks offering. And when you bring a korban, what do you bring a thanks offering for? It is a type of shlomim that is brought for specifically a shlomim is a peace offering, which means you could donate a shlomim anytime you want. The person, again, just pledges a shlomim offering. There's one type of shlomim offering where a person will pledge it as a korban toda, as a thanksgiving offering. Do you know when you bring a thanksgiving offering? If you have been in a dangerous situation. And the Gemara says there are 4 types of categories for a person who should bring a korban toda. One of them is somebody who has been freed from jail. And when we say jail over here, we mean a person who got out of a non-Jewish captivity situation. There's a person whose captivity, the Gemara says, includes all forms of suffering. Because when you're a captive, they can do anything they want to you. When you're a captive, they could beat you, they could starve you, they could do anything. So a person gets out of non-Jewish captivity, in other words, you've been kidnapped, essentially kidnapped, and you make it out, you bring a thanksgiving offering, as opposed to being in a Torah lockup where you were punished for a certain reason. But here we're talking about where you get out of a non-Jewish captivity situation, number 1. Number 2, somebody who crosses the sea. If you cross the sea, in the old days it was sea travel, which was very, very dangerous. If you cross the desert travel is also very, very dangerous. Or if you have recovered from a life-threatening illness, in all these 4 situations, the Rashi Tevos, the mnemonic to remember them is Chaim. Chaim is the Ches Yud Yud Mem. Now, that's the basic description of it, of your life like that. That's one of the reasons nowadays, by the way. Do you know if you travel, or if you're in a dangerous, let's say somebody comes out of a dangerous situation nowadays, you make a bracha, you bench gomel. Hagomel Achayivim Tovos, which is a bracha you should make in front of 10 people. Our custom nowadays is to get an aliyah and make it in shul in front of 10 people, but you don't have to. You can make a gomel, you can bench gomel, you could just get 10 people together and make, the custom is.
Any situation, you should bench gomel.
No, these are situations where you bring a korban toda, or any life-threatening. This basically covers all life-threatening situations. If you bench gomel nowadays, benching gomel is any life-threatening situation. So if a person was in a car accident, and they managed to live, they would bench gomel. If a person was in a near miss, you don't. And it doesn't mean you missed. You have to be in the situation and you walked away from it as opposed to almost being in the situation which you would need to walk away from. So if you happen to swerve at the last second, you weren't in an accident. It would have to be that your person is in the accident and survived an accident. Now, we're not talking about a fender bender over. We're talking about where it was a genuinely life-threatening situation. So if a person jumped out of an airplane and their parachute didn't open, they would have to, and they lived through it, they would have to bench gomel. If a person jumps out of an airplane and their parachute does open, they probably also have to bench gomel. But certainly if it didn't open and you lived through it, you'd have to bench gomel. A person who survives a dangerous surgery, a woman who gives birth benches gomel.
They throw a kiddush nowadays, like in most of these situations.
That's a sudas hodah. A sudas hodah is where you make a festive meal to publicize the fact that it's been said. That's called a sudas hodah. But somebody who travels, a woman who gives birth benches gomel. Sometimes her husband does it for her. He just goes up to the Torah and he benches her, gets an aliyah. In other communities, they actually have a custom where the woman stands behind the mechitza. You get 10 men near the mechitza, and she makes the bracha, and everybody answers going for her. That's how the custom is, because childbearing is a potentially life-threatening situation. Now, one of the interesting practical questions that comes up nowadays: what about plane travel? Let's say you flew. Do you bench gomel after you fly? So, flying in airplanes today is not considered dangerous by any stretch of the imagination. Malaysian Airlines is having some problems, getting lost, getting shot down, things like that. But in general, even Malaysian Airlines is not dangerous. Flying in Russia or somewhere in the Congo, that might be a little bit different. Russian pilots have been known to get loaded before they there was one plane that crashed in Russia years ago because the pilot turned over the controls to his 11-year-old son. And he took it into a dive and the pilot couldn't get it out of a dive. And they had a situation here in Israel where a Russian plane was coming to land and they got within 300 yards of the main Jerusalem-Tel Aviv highway because the Russian pilot thought that was the runway. Because they're right by Tel Aviv, right by the airport. He actually lost straight. He landed. He thought that he was near. He got within 300 yards. It's pretty darn close until he figured out that wasn't the runway. They just had a case in America where I think it was in Kansas City, or in Missouri, somewhere in Missouri, where there are two airports that are very close, about 7 miles apart, and a guy landed a 747 in the wrong airport. And then he had to wait overnight because that airport till he could take off, and whatever the technical problems, he can't land the 740. They just got the airport. He got the runways mixed up because some of it is done through visual recognition by the pilot. And apparently, this was within the last month. The guy landed the plane in the wrong airport. So that could happen, but flying is not dangerous, and therefore, if you fly from here to England, why should you bench Gomel? It's no different than driving a car from here to Tel Aviv. You don't bench Gomel. You say Oh, even storms are not, in most airlines, so if something out of the ordinary happens, for example, when the guy landed the plane in the Hudson River, because birds flew into the engine, and he landed the plane, you'd have to bench Gomel. That was a life-threatening situation. He actually entered. Now, if there's a storm, and the plane actually is out of control, and the pilot regains control of the plane, yes, that was a life-threatening situation. But if it's a situation that could have been life-threatening, but it never got to that stage, then you don't bench Goma for it. It's very technical, very, very close, very difficult call, but that's the rule. Now, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein rules that when you fly from here, when you fly over water, you do bench Gomel. If you fly over water, why? What's his logic? His logic is based on this concept, that the danger, the reason they instituted the bracha is that you crossed a body of water. Has nothing to do with the danger. If you cross the body of water, you have to bench Gomel. So if you fly from New York to California, you don't bench Gomel because you didn't cross a body of water. If you cross over a body of water, ironically, I'm only thinking now in retrospect, I didn't do it, but ironically, I flew from Chicago to Detroit. And you fly right across Lake Michigan. And it could very well be that I should have benched Gomel for that because I flew across the bay, as opposed to flying from New York to Los Angeles, which is 5.5 hours, and you wouldn't bench Gomel because you've not crossed a significant. It could be you cross the desert though, maybe because you cross the deserts of Arizona. I don't know. The custom is that unless you cross a body of water, you do not bench Gomel, and then even then there are a lot of people who don't bench Gomel after a plane flight because it's not dangerous.
What is bench Gomel?
Bench Gomel is when you go to, you make a bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaGomel L'Chayavim Tovos. It does good things for those who are chayiv, who are those culpable. Shegmalani Kol Tov, who has bestowed all good on me. It's about a bracha that you make. It's like a Thanksgiving bracha.
Do you have to eat or anything?
No eating. It's believe it or not, a Jewish custom that doesn't involve eating. Can you believe such a thing? No eating, just making the bracha. Hunter, what are we going to ask?
So with the water, that's kind of like cut and dry, but in the less clear cases of the storm and this and that and the other thing, is it better to err for leniency?
Yeah, we don't make the bracha. Unless you know for a fact. And again, air travel. First of all, they don't always tell you what the situation was. In general, in air travel, if a plane gets hit by lightning, chas v'shalom, it could be seen as potentially life-threatening. But even that, I just wonder, just in general, this is off the subject, I always wonder, with all the engineering, with all the advances in it, they still can't keep birds out of a plane engine? They still can't keep birds. They can't build, you can't build a screen that they just bounce off of? I mean, is it really so hard? Apparently it is, otherwise they would do it. That's one of the biggest dangers in plane travel is birds getting sucked into the engines. That one, they were sucked into both engines. Most planes, I think, could fly on one engine. Even a 747 that has 4 engines could fly on one engine. At least land the plane. It could fly a certain distance on one engine. And that bird, I just can't understand how with all, you just see sometimes, with all the advances in technology, they could put a man on the moon and they'd have nuclear submarines and they still cannot make a photocopy machine that does not get the paper tangled up in it. There are just certain things in life that they could cure cancer, but they can't cure the common cold. There are just certain things that you're not able to do. So that is where the concept of making the blessing comes from. That's why a woman makes a blessing as well, because a woman has been in a life-threatening situation because when she gave birth. Now, remarkably, and this goes back to what you asked, there's something called a sudas hodah. Somebody who's been in a seriously bad situation. What was the case recently? Somebody was in a coma for a long time, and then they came out of the coma where against all the expectations. So they made a sudas hodah. They made a festive meal thanking God publicly, a public show of gratitude to God. That's called a sudas hodah, a festive meal. Now, remarkably, when you bring a korban todah, unlike other shlomim offerings, pay attention carefully, it's a remarkable concept. They also bring 40 breads. There are 40 breads that are brought. You bake 40 breads, 30 of which are matzah, 10 of which are chametz, breads. And then when you eat the korban, you eat those breads as well. That's at a Thanksgiving offering. What do you think is the idea behind that? Anybody want to guess what's the idea behind that?
Who eats it, the Kohen or
The Kohen and anybody he invites to the feast to eat, partake.
Anybody, the person that...
You could invite anybody you want. What's the idea? The idea is like this. Because it's a Thanksgiving offering, you want to publicize the miracle. So how do you publicize the miracle? Well, you make some extra food. The Jews will come. It's free food, Jews will come. Every kiddush in a shul on Shabbos, if they would just charge 25 cents to participate in the kiddush, nobody would go. I'm not paying. If it's free, free food, Jews, you charge $1 for participating, and you're getting $10 worth of food easily. I'm not paying. I'm going home to eat my chol. Why should I eat your chol? It's free. We're not going to pass up that opportunity, right? So you make some food. Jews are going to show up. What's the idea here? The idea is to publicize the miracle. But the question becomes, why 40 loaves of bread? Now listen to something. This is a truly remarkable idea. You know anywhere in the Torah where the number 40 is used? Go ahead, Mashiach.
The days on Mount Sinai.
Good. Moshe Rabbeinu was there 40 days and 40 nights. Where else?
Flood.
The flood was 40 days, and it rained 40 days and 40 nights. Very good. Where else?
40 years.
40 years in the desert. Where else? 400 years was the decree of exile, of Mitzrayim, which is just 40 times 10. 40 units, it's 10 units of 40. Where else? A mikveh is 40 sa'ahs of water. In order to be a kosher mikveh, you have to have the number 40 sa'ah. Whatever a sa'ah is, it's a measure of water. They call it a gallon, whatever it is. You have to have 40 sa'ahs of water in a mikveh. Where else? A child, when a woman gets pregnant, you can daven for the gender of the child for 40 days. After 40 days of conception, it is a fait accompli. You can no longer daven for the gender. In other words, a boy. You can no longer daven, if a wife gets pregnant, you can daven for 40 days. Up to after 40 days, the gender is determined. Where else do you see the number 40? You know that lashes in the Torah are described, the verse of the Torah refers to 39 lashes as 40 minus 1. There's another place where the number 40 appears. Where else? How many?
There's another 40 minus 1. Is that one more?
Yes, there's another. Good, very good. In the laws of Shabbos, are described in the Mishnah of Shabbos as 40 minus 1 prohibited areas of activity, as opposed to 39. Now, that begs two questions. Number one, what's the significance of number 40? And why do you find two situations where it's called 40 minus 1? I mean, if you really want to be cool, just call it 70 minus 21. They'll get you thinking. Or how about 23 plus 16? Oh, that's good. The answer is that what is the theme of the number 40? Now pay attention carefully, it's very, very interesting. Everywhere you see the number 40 is the concept of some sort of renewal. The world needs to be renewed, so it rains for 40 days and 40 nights. A child is conceived, the renewal of the child is a fait accompli at 40 days, the gender is determined. Moshe Rabbeinu is going to take the Jewish people to a new state, the state of Torah, 40 days on the mountain. The Jewish people need to renew their attitude in the desert because they've sinned with the spies. You need a renewal of your attitude. 40 years in the desert. The Jewish people need a renewed attitude of faith. 40 years, 10 times in Egypt. Everywhere you look, the number of 40 represents renewal. Well, that makes sense over here. Why do you bring 40 breads? Because this is a person who was in a life-threatening situation. He got a new lease on life. So he brings 40, the unit of 40, he brings it again. Those are the 40 breads that he brings. Now, what's remarkable is, so then why is Malchus a mikveh? What is a mikveh? Every time a person experiences impurity, any impurity, has to be immersed in a mikveh. Impurity is always associated with either a loss of life or a loss of life potential. That means if a person comes in contact with a dead rodent or a dead body, that's when tuma happens, right? Because you've come in contact with a loss of life. A woman who becomes a nida because she's menstruated, that means that she's lost life potential. That means the egg did not become fertilized that month, it's washed out of the system. So loss of life or loss of life potential is associated with tuma, with impurity, and therefore you need to go to the mikveh. The mikveh is 40 suns because it's almost like a new beginning on life. You came into contact with death, it's a renewal. You find this theme all the time. The same theme repeats itself. This concept of renewal repeats itself all over the Torah with the number 40. It's remarkable. Now, that brings us to Malchus. Why is Malchus described as 40 minus 1 if it's really 39? Now, there is an opinion a rejected opinion in the Mishnah that he actually gets 40 lashes. That's not what we paskin. We paskin 39. So why is it that lashes are 39 lashes as opposed to, and it's called 40 minus 1? So the answer is, who is it that gets lashes? Lashes is a great idea, by the way. That really straightens people out good and proper, right? It's too bad we can't do it anymore. Okay, so, there's a lot of job satisfaction too. All right, we can't do it. Now, imagine you start, who needs lashes? Somebody has sinned, right? Somebody sinned. And what happened was 2 witnesses came to him. Remember, it doesn't happen for unintentional avera. It's only if you did an avera unintentionally. 2 witnesses walk up, the guy's got a big pepperoni pizza in front of him. And 2 witnesses come over and say, listen, you can't eat that, that's treif. You got pork on there, right? Or it's kosher meat, kosher pepperoni, but it's meat cooked with milk. Torah prohibition. The guy says, well, I'm not that religious. They said, but if you eat it, you're going to get lashes. He says, I'm still not that religious. And he indulges. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the pizza because now we're taking it base and now you're going to get lashes. You give him a medical examination and they give him whatever a doctor assesses he could take up to 39 lashes without dying. So the doctor says, okay, you're good, you're strong, you're a high school linebacker. We're going to give you 39 at a best. Okay, now what's the idea over here? Why are we hitting the guy? Okay, it's a warning to other people and it's a punishment for him. But what is any punishment meant to achieve?
Teach a lesson.
Teach you a lesson. We went, you know what? You got the wrong attitude, buddy. You need a renewed attitude.
But they stop the lashes any time.
1 second. We need a renewed attitude. How do you renew your attitude? We renew it with the number that symbolizes renewal, which is what? 40 minus 1. Why not 39? Because the theme of the hitting is 40. The whole idea is the 40. The 40 means you need to renew your attitude. So why don't we give you 40? Why is it called 39 minus 1? It's the same idea by Shabbos. Why is it called 40 minus 1? What's the idea of Shabbos? What's the idea of Shabbos? Every week we need to kind of recharge and renew our spiritual battery. You've been involved in the mundane work week. You're a farmer or you're an accountant or whatever it is you're doing. You're a businessman. And now you need to renew your spiritual side. So Shabbos comes along. We say to you, look, you know what we're going to do? We're going to create a playing field for you that is conducive to renewing your spiritual energies. You know what that playing field is called? Shabbos. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to take away all 39 of your potential distraction areas of creative activity. There's only one problem. You could stop a person from being creative, but then he could hop into bed and just sleep away the entire Shabbos. I know guys who do that. They just go to sleep Friday night, wake up Saturday night. So they don't have to suffer through Shabbos. So the Torah says that you're missing the point. You know what the point of Shabbos is? The point of Shabbos is you need to renew yourself. We can take you up to the 39th level, but we need a little bit of you. You got to put something into it. You're the number 40. So Shabbos is renewal, meaning 39, here's the playing field. We took away all the obstacles. But we can only do 39. We can only take it to the 39. Number 40 comes from you yourself, that you have to put in some initiative, some energy has to come from you. That's why it's called 40 minus 1. Because the entire theme is the 40 that you should try to renew yourself. The same thing with the lashes. The entire theme of the lashes is that you should renew yourself. How do you renew yourself? Because we give you 39 at the best, as they call it in England. Right? We'll give you 39 at the best. That ought to renew your attitude. But again, you could get lashes, and you could just become a very passive Jew. We don't want you to be a passive Jew. So you guys say, okay, I'm going to avoid eating treif. That's not enough. We want you to renew your attitude and become a devoted Jew, move in the other direction. That's number 40. You have to take that step. So it's called 40 minus 1 because the entire theme is the number 40. That's why the mikveh is 40, and that's why a child is 40. The number 40, every time you see the number 40, it immediately should trigger in your mind some sort of concept of renewal. So that's why there are 40 breads over here, because you're celebrating, you're spreading the word that God saved you, and you're doing it with the number 40 to show and appreciate yourself that you have now an appreciation and you have a new, it's a renewal of life for you.